if we see a standoff where you have on one side American tier 1 operators and on the other side the cartel, let's picture the Mexican military or the National Guard coming in. Which side, Vincent, do you think the Mexicans are going to take if they have made it very clear that they want to protect their sovereignty? They're going to go up right up against behind the cartels. They're not going to go and dap up the fucking tier 1 operators from the US. No, because at this point, it's not about ending the cartels. It's about Mexican sovereignty, and it's in their constitution. And it's a very nationalistic country. I mean, Americans should understand that.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Welcome to Borderland. My next guest right here is Katarina Szulc. Kat, I want to call you Kat for the interview. Is that okay?
Go ahead. Yeah, it's no problem at all.
Well, you came across on my social media one day, and like it does, anything in the cartel immigration space kind of falls into my Instagram or something. And then I took a screenshot of your social media and sent it to my producer. I said, I want her on. And she goes, I'm already contacting her. So by chance, I'm not sure what it was, just the way social media works. We both saw your social media and we both were interested in having you on. So thank you for joining us today.
That's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Well, if you don't mind, for the audience, can you give just kind of a rundown and bio of who you are, and then I'll get into some of the questions on why you even started to become a journalist.
Yeah, so I'm a Canadian journalist, but I'm based in Mexico, and I'm mainly covering, especially recently, the war on drugs, crime, politics, and especially now with Trump being president of the United States, a lot of immigration and also how American policies are affecting Mexican politics and Mexican people, whether that's along the border or just generally across the entire republic. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I freelance, so I'm not attached to any particular outlet. I do work for certain international outlets, like, well, as a Canadian, CBC, also the BBC, etc. But mainly I'm doing a lot of super raw, unfiltered reporting on my personal mediums like my Substack and my Instagram and my Twitter.
Yeah, I've seen a couple things. I want to get into it later, but so do you speak Spanish?
Claro que sí. Yo hablo español perfectamente bien como si fuera inglés.
Where did you learn to speak such good Spanish? Are you Mexican?
No, I'm not Mexican. And this is like another thing too, right? Because I always tell people like I'm very neutral because I'm not Mexican. I'm Polish and like Polish descent, born and raised in Canada. But I speak Spanish because I actually speak a few languages. Like it's just something that comes naturally to me. But Spanish is the first language that I started learning on my own when I was like 12, 13. So like more than 10 years ago now. And I would come to Mexico quite frequently and like would listen to a lot of music in Spanish and watch a lot of movies in Spanish. So I just managed to pick it up. And it's funny because some people say, she's trying so hard to sound Mexican. And I'm like, not fucking trying to sound Mexican. It just comes out like that because I don't speak Spanish. I speak Mexican. So, no. Yeah.
It sounds good. And look, I understand very little Spanish, and your Spanish sounded beautiful to me. I thought it sounded perfect. Man, so two things. What's your citizenship currently?
Canadian.
Canadian citizen. And do you live in Mexico?
I frequent Mexico a lot.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I split my time.
What does that look like when it comes to like just an immigration standpoint? Are you allowed to go to Mexico freely?
Of course. Yeah, like anyone. I follow like all the immigration laws and policy. So yeah, everything it's and I don't work for any Mexican company or outlet. So yeah, it's totally by the.
What was it that drew you into the kind of the cartel and drug space, immigration space?
Well, for me, so I always wanted to cover foreign news. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. But obviously, because my Spanish is really good and because of the proximity of Mexico to Canada versus like if I were to go to Afghanistan, and also just like in terms of logistics and safety as like a woman on her own, Mexico just was the best option. And also because I have always been very privy to Mexican policy, politics, cultural context, historical context. And so for me, it was kind of a no-brainer to come in here and do this. It didn't start off, my reporting didn't start off with me covering like narcos, the war on drugs, what I'm doing now. And especially like when people are talking to me, or when I was on Julian, he's like the cartel girl. Like that wasn't a brand that I woke up one day and was like, this is what I'm going to be. It kind of just happened because I managed to get so much exclusive access in a very short period of time, and to put out quite a few hard-hitting stories, in my opinion, that were original. So for me, when I started doing that, I started to realize that a lot of people really liked what I was doing. Of course, a lot of people fucking hated it, but cool. So so I was like, I'm gonna stick to this beat because I'm putting out a lot of stories that have to do with the war on drugs, that have to do with narcos. But if you've noticed, if you read my reporting or watch anything that I do, I typically go beyond the headlines. So, I'm not, and I talk about this a lot, is I'm not trying to get into the nitty gritty of the gossip. I mean, I'll talk about it and report on why and who captured El Mayo and what, the sort of rumors are surrounding that, or the theories. But I'm always going beyond the headline. So who's affected by this? What is now happening because of this action in communities and in regular civilian households and things like that? Because for me, this type of reporting, it's not just, oh my God, narcos. It's also, it affects people's day-to-day lives, which typically a lot of the people in this organized crime, narco space are not really focusing on. So I noticed that gap, and my reporting has always been, me as a journalist, I've always been very human-based. And so, of course, I will get into the nitty gritty and the headlines and what people are, itching to find out, and get those exclusive sources. But I will always incorporate the human component behind that as well. So yeah, this is kind of how it happened. It kind of just fell into my lap. I mean, when I first started reporting in Mexico, I was doing a lot of health-based stories and politics. But of course, being in Mexico, organized crime seems to play a role in almost every single beat. Whether I was covering health and, clinics that were getting shut down in Tamaulipas for using expired anesthesia, there was sort of this air of cartel involvement behind that. Whether I'm covering the Mexican presidential election, there's a lot of organized crime context behind that. And we see that because I've been posting a lot about the Mexican government and the ties with organized crime. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, I see some of your stuff recently. There was some decapitations and things like that, all kinds of different crazy things. And it's a space that obviously I frequent. I know enough about. I used to work in the space, all those things. And I do think that the way you delivered is kind of a refreshing tone to it. It's a very different kind of the way it's presented. I enjoy that. It's sometimes, I follow several journalists, and I do like the way you're representing it and the way you're telling that story. What's life like for you down there, for the citizens who are living in the areas heavily affected by the cartel violence and organized crime? What is daily life for them when you see it?
Daily life sucks. So especially if you're living in a cartel run region, or where there's a lot of conflict going on right now, which unfortunately is a lot of Mexico. Since El Mayo's capture in July, I mean, like, fast forward a little bit, since September 9th, when the infighting really started within the Sinaloa cartel, it's kind of like a virus. I always kind of refer to it like that because it started off in this one region in Sinaloa where we've always heard, for the longest time, since the 80s, I'd even say that there's been conflict there and cartel violence just because of how much of a presence they have there. But this spread throughout the country. So this really, like a virus, infected Michoacan, Tamaulipas, Veracruz. It didn't stay concentrated within Sinaloa. And so the problem with this, and with when you ask about daily life and the quality of life, it's not great because when you're essentially living in a war zone, whether you're involved in the conflict or not, your daily civilian life is impacted by this infighting. When I was in Sinaloa I think I went in October or November, October, this was really at a time where things had heated up. It really at a time of conflict. I mean, nothing has cooled down. It's still pretty bad. But when I went, this was a time when the fighting was pretty much had come to a head. And so what that means for regular people is there is no quality of life. From the basics of going grocery shopping or going for a dinner to the long-lasting effects of mental health of living in a conflict zone. So what do I mean by this, right? When I was over there, we found out that there was a guy who ran into a Soriana, which is a huge supermarket, screaming for help because he was being followed by armed men in what he claimed to be a case of mistaken identity. So they were after him, thinking that he was someone else, which is very common, unfortunately. He runs into the Soriana, he's screaming for help, hides into the bathroom. Employees call the National Guard and the military, and they come for him. The armed men retreat. And of course, this is happening midday. It was like noon in a really busy area in Culiacan, in the heart of the capital city. And as I'm literally standing outside, I'm filming, right? Because I'll post like the reels. This is like a big part of my reporting, is to just show exactly like the nitty gritty of what is going on, raw, pretty much unedited. And then I'm filming myself explaining like, this is a day in the life for people where if someone wants to come grocery shopping right now, get fucked. It's not going to happen because now this entire huge supermarket is shut down because of this daily violence. And as I'm filming this and talking into my phone, I see a family of 4 walking up behind me and I'm thinking, holy shit, what are the odds, right? This is literally a family that's probably coming to go grocery shopping. So I turn around and I'm like, are you guys trying to go grocery shopping? They're like, is it open? I'm like, no, you're out of luck. They're like, fuck, okay. And so, that's on a smaller scale, but in reality, that's affecting your daily routine. That's affecting your day-to-day life. I should have asked, and I didn't ask, how far had they come to come do their grocery shopping? What in what way is this an inconvenience for them? And it's probably more significant than for like the average upper middle class family in like fucking Idaho. That's like, oh shit, maybe there was a gas leak at the Sprouts. Now we can't go grocery shopping. This is different because for a lot of these people living in this city, especially right now, money is tight because their economy is failing. And this is the case for a lot of cartel-ridden regions across Mexico. And it's really unfortunate because the people who have authority, people in political positions of power, in my opinion, are not, to the best of their abilities, acknowledging this and not helping people out. I mean, I would say that Sinaloa right now is in a COVID-like economy, which means people should be receiving aid. And we know that a COVID economy is essentially synonymous with a failing economy. So why the fuck are people expected to go and live their daily lives when you're walking your kids to school and there's dead, battered, bloody bodies on the side of the road. Kids are seeing this. And then your father can't go to work because the restaurant that he works at is shut down because everywhere has to close by the time it's nightfall. And it doesn't get dark very late in Mexico. So, in Sinaloa, particularly even. So, this is something that we're seeing is affecting people, and it's going to continue to affect people a lo largo plazo, in the long run, because this isn't something that just goes away. Living in a conflict zone, whether it's your mental health, the economy, your day-to-day errands, is not the same anymore. And unfortunately, I don't see an end in sight. I certainly see an end in sight for the fucking Sinaloa cartel, because when you have a family fighting against each other, it's like a house of cards just waiting to fall, and little by little it is falling. But for people who are not involved in this, they're done. They're tired. And I sort of allude to it in a way where, when you had a really long day at work and then you come home and you make your dinner, and let's say you're making a stir fry and you put everything into a pan, and then you're so tired and you're so hungry, and then you turn around and then you fucking hit the pan off the burner and everything falls, and you're just like, oh my God. And maybe you start crying, or you're just, I'm done and I want to go to bed. That's how I see the regular people, citizens of Sinaloa right now, or people who are living in severely cartel-ridden regions. They're done. They're at their wits' end, and no one is helping them. And so, really like going into that sort of borderland component, Trump declaring cartels FTOs, a lot of Mexican people living in these cartel-ridden regions, Mexican people who perhaps did not like Trump prior to this, are like, fuck yeah, let's go, because we've had enough. Yes.
So the census down in Mexico is, if they're tired of the cartel stuff, this is what they've been wanting.
100%.
My fear is, what's the other side? What's the other side with Mexico's potential corruption with the cartels? What's the cartels responding? It's very new, but is there any of that information I'm curious about?
Listen, Trump first mentioned designating the cartels as FTOs in 2019. That means that these cartels, they already clocked this. What was that, 6 years ago? That's a long time for a criminal organization who has military level weaponry to prepare for a war, essentially, right?
Yeah.
People right now, everyone's like, holy shit, FTOs, right? We first heard about this in 2019, and then we heard about it again in 2022 when Governor Greg Abbott said, don't fucking mess with Texas. And he signed his own executive order designating the Mexican drug cartels as FTOs. So this is a long time coming, which means the cartels never forgot about this. They knew this was happening. And one thing about the Mexican cartels, even if they know they're fighting a losing battle, they're still going to fight it. And they have the means to fight it. Whether they lose or not, it doesn't matter, because we're still going to see a lot of collateral damage. But for most Mexican people that are living in these areas, even for those who are not, they're just done with this cartel shit. They want someone to stand up against the cartels. A lot of people in this country have family members who have gone missing, who are murdered, who have been involved in the drug trade, willingly or not. The cartels, it goes beyond drugs.
Yeah.
I know that Trump is focused on this because of the fentanyl overdose deaths, but for a lot of people here, the cartel means a lot more than just fentanyl. It means human trafficking. It means rape. It means murder. It means extreme levels of violence. And for your average, regular, everyday person, you don't want to live in an environment where this is the quote unquote norm. And the Mexican government, unfortunately, especially with the previous and current administrations, abrazos, no balazos is the policy. Hugs, not bullets. And if you are living in a community that is ridden by shootouts, violence, bullets, you don't want to see your government returning the, giving their action back is a fucking hug, right?
I like the
make
way you
sense.
articulated that. Yes, I absolutely agree.
Hi, everyone. This is Dustin Diefenderfer, host of the Mountain Tough podcast. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Borderland. We are excited to launch season 2 of the Mountain Tough podcast next Monday. This season, we will be leveling up the game, continuing to bring you some of the most inspiring, some of the most mentally tough humans on planet Earth, from survivors to professional guides, hunters, industry leaders.
And I knew that to survive this, I had to block out that pain.
That's why I have such a big advantage there. It's all because of my mind.
If you don't have the desire, you'll never have the discipline.
We'll be breaking down the topic of mental fitness, mindset, grit, resilience, fortitude, so that you can continue to sharpen that mindset, so that you can stay dangerous, so that you can live always ready. Catch a new episode every Monday on our YouTube channel at Mountain Tough Fitness, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
One of the things, on one of your posts, you talked about that you have an informant who's telling you about President Sheinbaum's and how she's reacting to this, that she is nervous for multiple different reasons. I'd love to hear that for the audience to know that as well.
Yeah, that story actually went viral yesterday because a Mexican outlet took it, and instead of saying, they have someone in the government that's telling them this information, is Katarina Szulc has someone in the government telling her this information. So thanks for that, little target. But yeah, I do have a source in it, pretty high up very high up in the Mexican federal government, who says that, Claudia Sheinbaum is publicly maintaining this really cool, calm, and collected public perception. She wasn't, no pasa nada that Trump didn't invite me to the inauguration. No pasa nada that there's going to be mass deportations and now they're going to declare cartels FTOs. In reality, this is not her vibe. People are going to come at me for my Gen X way of explaining these things and painting a picture. I can't help it. She's shitting her pants, essentially. She really is panicking, because when you have a powerhouse like the United States, who is your actual, in proximity, your literal neighbor, and your biggest trade partner, coming in and saying, hey, listen, basically Trump is saying, your government sucks and you're not doing anything. So balls to the wall, I'm going to do something. That is scary, probably for any world leader, but particularly for a world leader who is part of a party, the Morena party, that has been notoriously known for having connections with the Sinaloa cartel. There was a whole story about this, and actually a New York Times reporter got doxxed by the previous Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, for looking into how the Sinaloa cartel provided his campaign in 2006 with $2 million through a third party donation, whatever, right? And then the governor of Sinaloa, currently Rocha Moya, was actually a protest about him today, and a bunch of people in the state rallied together saying, fuera Rocha Moya, out with Rocha Moya. He's also part of the Morena party and has been allegedly tied to a lot of nefarious dealings with the Sinaloa cartel. I even heard a rumor from a source who would not make up this rumor. It's pretty, top source for me, who said that the reason why El Mayo was captured when he was because the United States government said, if you don't give us a head honcho in the Sinaloa cartel, we're going to come down on Rocha Moya, the governor of Sinaloa, and there is an open case against him in the United States for his ties with organized crime with the cartels and all of his children who are living in the United States. So allegedly that sort of deal went down. And when you have Trump now coming in and saying, all right, Rubio's going to name the Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco cartel, the Gulf cartel, and the Noreste cartel, that they are terrorist organizations, and we're going to freeze their assets and freeze the assets of anyone who is a known or a possible associate of these criminal organizations. For people in levels of government or business tycoons, anyone who wants to watch out for their money and their public perception, their reputation, and their power that they have within their country, they're shitting their pants because they know that Trump probably isn't fucking around. And at the end of the day, the person at the top of this tower is Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico. And no matter how much you tell people or are publicly stating that you're calm and you don't care, people are seeing you sweat, and people know that you're, people could infer, even if it wasn't for my source. And I think that's why that story did so well, was because I said that I have a source who's saying she's sweating, she's panicking. Yeah. But I think people ate that up because people already assumed that that was happening. It was at that point, it was just confirmation bias that the president of Mexico, who people say is part of the narco party, is freaking out that these criminal organizations are going to be declared by the United States as terrorist organizations. Yeah, I would probably be shitting my pants too.
Yeah, it's we get a lot of guests on here that talk about Mexico and how corrupt it is. Could you confirm how corrupt it potentially is all the way up to the top? And then another question is there any kind of sources that might say that even leads into DC?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, through my own reporting, and simply just through looking into context and details, whether it's about, the investigation into the previous Mexican president receiving money from the Sinaloa cartel, the open investigation into the governor of Sinaloa, and then El Mayo ending up on the American side of the border. It doesn't take a fucking genius to put these puzzle pieces together and say, yeah, this is corruption that runs through the deepest and most private corridors of every level of government in Mexico. And this is something that we've seen for years, and people know about this. I'm not coming on here and breaking some crazy fucking story saying, oh my God, the Mexican government is probably corrupt. I mean, let's be fucking for real. But the difference now is that Trump is publicly screaming from the rooftops of the White House that we're going to crack down on this corruption. Why? Because this level of corruption has allowed for too many Americans to die. Yeah. So for years, there's been heroin, meth, crack, but now fentanyl kind of changed the tune a little bit because fentanyl is so deadly, it's so toxic, and it's coming into the United States through, by the way, both borders, northern and southern border. And I talk about that a lot. We can go back to that. And I think that at this point, it's, okay, there's too many people dying. There's too much fentanyl. We need to sort of crack down on this in a way. And I mean, it's important to keep in mind that people in Mexico aren't doing fentanyl, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So it's, of course, the Mexican president is going to say, hypothetically, allegedly, if you're the Mexican president and you're profiting off of organized crime and the citizens of your country are not dying at extreme rates due to organized crime, due to the drugs, let's say, because the organized crime is killing a lot of people because of public displays of violence. But if you're profiting off of it and you don't have hundreds of thousands of people dying, why would you put an end to it?
Yeah, it's not your emergency.
No, it's not. It's an American emergency.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You know, there's thoughts that why would President Sheinbaum be so nervous about the whole indication for the cartel? Well, because eventually if the U.S. military gets involved, starts to dismantle them, and eventually when you start gathering intel, you start to find out the corruption might go all the way up. And that's a fear of some people, like, hey, if they start catching you guys, are you guys going to give me up? And that kind of idea, I imagine, through all politics in Mexico, I imagine is the fear as who knows what the next steps is for the United States government and the cartel, right? Designate them as a terrorist organization. What are the next steps? I have some thoughts because that is my background, special operations. So I have some ideas on what could be coming next. But in that, as we were dismantling terrorist organizations in Afghanistan or Iraq, it was a slow process of gathering intel, of doing missions. You know, we were doing raids on different houses, gathering those individuals up, whether it be kill or capture. And then we secure all information we had to gather on further intel to do further missions. And in those intel gathering systems, you start to identify other people associated with these individuals. And then you continue to break it down slowly. That's the process of what I did in Iraq and Afghanistan. I imagine we're not far from that with now added technology that would make it even easier process. And so when you do that, the web of lies that's been happening, the web of corruption starts to kind of show its face. And that's what I believe a lot of politicians will be fearing. Even if there is corruption spilled over in America, I think we will find it during these times. But that's what I think is happening in the higher ends of the government in Mexico.
I agree. And I think that's what's prompting this strong sense of fear is, it's not about them going in and capturing the guys who are responsible for making fentanyl or even trafficking it. It's about assets frozen for associates, cartel sleeper cells in the United States, people who are in the United States, sort of in a, exile in a way. They can't be in Mexico. They're in the United States. They're living sort of cushy lives. And now that life is going to unravel because why do you have X amount of money that somehow ties back to someone who is associated with the cartel? Automatically, now you become an associate and those assets are frozen. And I think that is going to be the biggest deterrent. And it's also going to be what's spooking most people is not the American government, going in and blowing up these trap houses in Culiacan or Reynosa. It's going to be people who are in positions of power, who have a lot of money, who have a lot of nefarious money, dirty money, and they're going to have to say goodbye to that money, or they're going to have to try to hide it. And they're now going to be on a list, and they're going to be watched. And I think that's going to scare a lot of people in business, people in politics, who have ties with Mexico and who have ties with organized crime. Yeah.
So let me ask you, you mentioned something earlier about the cartel. They've been preparing for this. They've been ready for it. Do you believe that they have the ability to really defend themselves in the event that, say, the U.S. forces come into Mexico? Do you really believe that there would be a substantial fight?
I think there will be a substantial fight, and I think they will put their best foot forward to defend themselves. They have drones, they have RPGs, they have fully armored vehicles. I mean, they're armed to the tits, basically, and they're not afraid to use it, and they're not afraid to die. And when you're going up against someone who doesn't, have value for their life or really any human life, that's a scary thought. This is someone who has nothing to lose because this is what they grew up in and this is what they knew or perhaps were willing to die for. Do I think they stand a chance against American military, American tier 1 operators? Fuck no. But are they going to try? 100%. And I think it's really important to consider that the Mexican government is very much against the United States coming in and in a way, quote unquote, attacking Mexican sovereignty by doing this, right? And I know that Marco Rubio has said that, come on, Mexico, let's do this together. Mexico's going to tell Rubio to go fuck himself. They're not going to want to do this together at all because of what we just talked about, right? Of their reasons for being scared. Now, let's think hypothetically, right? So if the cartels have, the weaponry and the mentality to go up and fight this fight, if we see a standoff where you have on one side American tier 1 operators and on the other side the cartel, let's picture the Mexican military or the National Guard coming in. Which side, Vincent, do you think the Mexicans are going to take if they have made it very clear that they want to protect their sovereignty? They're going to go up right up against behind the cartels. They're not going to go and dap up the fucking tier 1 operators from the US. No, because at this point, it's not about ending the cartels. It's about Mexican sovereignty, and it's in their constitution. And it's a very nationalistic country. I mean, Americans should understand that. Yeah. And I understand it. But at the same time, I think that it's important for whatever action that's going to be taken once these FTOs are faced with tier 1 operators with the United States, with the Mexicans, is that they need to understand that the Mexican military is not going to be on their side. They're not going to go on the American side. And this goes back into history, right? Like in years past, where California, Arizona, New Mexico, this was Mexico. And so what is Mexico going to do? Protect their sovereignty, their national autonomy. Whether that means that they have to, in a way, stand up for the bad guy.
Man, that's an interesting thought. I don't know. I mean, you know that probably better than I do. I guess my big concern would be if there would ever be any spillover into America, then that's a whole new threat for us and something to think about.
I think there will be.
Yeah, I imagine so. In that kind of event, there becomes these onesie-twosies that just want to kind of, I guess, win their little battle. And I imagine there could be a lot of little cross-border, I guess, engagements. Has there been, since Trump is in office, he signed, 100 different executive orders. I've seen that they already canceled the CBP One app, right? And there's other things that what else is kind of happening that you've heard of? Maybe some sources have told you that it's just happened within the past couple of days.
Well, so the whole thing about mass deportations isn't happening yet. We're seeing like a regular flow of deportees come across the border. But in Tijuana, they opened up, I think over the last, I would say 4 months, around 5 or 6 new migrant shelters opened up, just, bracing for that possible flow of deportees coming in. Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum has kind of wavered but on her stance on receiving the deportees, especially deportees that are not Mexican nationals. But I think right now, her latest stance has been we'll take them in, essentially. And we have the migrant facilities, and there's a new app even for Mexican nationals who, if they get deported, they basically click an emergency button. This was put in, I think, right when CBP One was canceled. But it essentially alerts your emergency contacts, and then also the shelters and any resources along border towns that you've been deported and that you're coming back. So they're kind of trying to put in these resources. I think the mass deportations are causing quite a lot of panic in the Mexican federal government, but we're not seeing that yet. More than anything, I think the designating cartels as FTOs is causing more panic. And keep in mind, it's not really causing panic that I know of, and speaking with sources within cartels. they're kind of like, my dick is bigger than yours type of mentality, and they're not too worried about it. But looking at, the border relations, I think something that's going to start to worry people is once these deportations, if they start to ramp up, not Mexican nationals being deported, but perhaps Venezuelan nationals that are part of Tren de Aragua. I think that there's a lack of preparation for really violent criminals who are not from Mexico coming into Mexico, because these are individuals who have been in the United States for quite some time now. They've gotten used to a certain amount of money over there, a certain amount of, I would say, even power within their criminal organization. And throwing those guys across the border into a place like Tijuana is just going to be a recipe for disaster. And it's something that I think Mexicans haven't really seen before. Sure, there was this influx of Haitian migrants that ended up in Mexico, but it's very different comparing someone who's, coming from war-torn Haiti than someone who is a member of Tren de Aragua from Venezuela, who has no sense of humanity for anyone and is really willing to do anything for $1, and is probably really doped up and could do some scary things and has probably already done some scary things. So I think that's something that I'm kind of bracing myself to see what's going to happen, especially over the next couple of months. I think the CBP1 app cancellation was kind of a shock for people because I don't think they were really expecting it to just like instantly shut down like that, especially for migrants who were kind of rushing to get to the border. And then you get there and the night Charlie, it doesn't exist anymore. You don't have an appointment. You can't make an appointment. But it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to come. And I'm a little bit skeptical about the whole mass deportations because Trump has always been really loud about secure the border, build the wall, deport everyone. But, Biden and Obama deported way more people during their administrations than Trump did. So it's really hard for me to say.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, a lot of the changes that they made from the top, from a border czar to as well as a new chief to just multiple different levels of changes from the top in the border space. I'm very curious to see what that looks like, and not just Border Patrol. I'm talking ICE, right? Who will be the entity that would be involved in these mass deportations, who are already soliciting for if you give them some kind of information, they'll pay you for it, things like that. So those are already being solicited throughout social media. I'm curious to see what that looks like. I'm curious to see how these deportations happen and exactly where they're sending them. I did read something about Claudia Sheinbaum saying, well, if you're going to be deporting this many, we can deport Americans back to America. And I don't know how recent that was or if that was an older thing, but I'm curious to see what happens if there is some kind of, I guess, a retaliation for mass deportations.
Yeah, I just think that that's honestly laughable because, first of all, there's bigger fish to fry. But second of all, you don't have of course, there is gentrification in Mexico and more than ever before, especially since the pandemic, especially in Mexico City. And we've seen that it's affecting people's lives entirely because it's definitely driven up the cost of living. But it is not at the same extent as how many undocumented people you have living in the United States. So it's very different. I also, I think that this whole mass deportation thing, there's a sort of false narrative around it because people think that it's going to really act as a deterrent. But I was literally just talking with someone in law enforcement last night who is, works with Border Patrol and has a lot of really good information. And he was telling me that they are seeing swaths of people still from India, Pakistan, Nepal coming into Mexico, getting their passports stamped by paid off border agents and making their way into New York. So do I think that this is sure you could talk about mass deportations all you want, but you also have mass migrants coming into your country still. I don't
Wow.
know how that's gonna work.
Yeah, that's interesting. For someone like you who's been embedded into this space, what is it that motivates you to continue to focus on this topic so much? What is it that drives you? It's dark, it's sad, it's hard. I'm sure your life has been threatened multiple times, if not even more so for this latest viral video. Why do you continue to do it?
Because it's not about me and I'm not the story. It's about, the human lives and the people that don't have a voice and that have these extremely harrowing stories to tell and are living day to day and generationally in violence. And no one is listening to them and no one is helping them. And even people who have the power to help them and to make their lives better are not doing it because a lot of these people are just in it for the money. And I'm not in it for the money. If I wanted to get rich, I wouldn't be a fucking journalist. So for me, I think it's really important to give a platform to these voices that often go unheard, which is like what I said, going beyond the headlines. And for a lot of people, especially living in a country like Mexico, they're very hardworking, they're very resilient, and yet it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't make a difference, a positive difference in their lives, because the people running this very country, whether it be the cartels, the Mexican federal government, law enforcement, any level of authority, are not focused on ensuring that these people are served and protected and, living a high, strong quality of life. So for me, it's always been about telling the stories that matter and uncovering the details that are affecting these people. So even just my story yesterday saying, the Mexican president can say all she wants, that she's chill and she's not worried and everything is fine. But she is worried. And most Mexican people are worried. So I think it's really important to also show these people, hey, it's not just you. You're living through a shitstorm right now. And you have two political leaders who are two very respectively outspoken people going toe to toe. Yeah, I do get threatened, and I think it's just stupid because there's more important people to threaten than me. Like, I don't understand why me. But it will never deter me from doing this job because I've always wanted to do this job and I've always wanted to tell these stories, and it's very rewarding to be able to talk to people and give them a platform, to talk about your son has been missing for the last 7 years. And now you as a mother have gotten a group of other mothers together to go and find bodies and human remains in the deserts in Mexico. And you've been able to give justice to a lot of people. These are incredible stories. And I'm not afraid to tell these stories because I've just never really been afraid like that. I don't know. I have a really high threshold for fear. And I don't have a death wish. I value my life, but I also am willing to talk to people and go places that the average Jane or Joe is not willing to. So yeah.
Did you ever serve in the military?
No, I didn't. But people say I sound like I did, or like I would have enlisted. But Canadian military is very different than serving in American military.
Yeah. No, well, listen, I admire your work. I admire you. This interview actually made me a bigger of a fan. We've been covering this space for a while now, and it's just, as it continues to evolve, I love seeing these journalists who are willing to risk everything just to tell the story. And that's crazy and bizarre that a journalist has to worry about their safety of their life, but it is not unheard of for a cartel to take out their frustrations on journalists who release these stories about them. And so it's always a
For
question
anyone.
of mine for anyone.
It's
right.
shooting the messenger. It's always going to be like that, and it's always been like that. You know, it's not about me being me. It's about me giving a platform to a certain person or certain information. So I never take it personally, but it is unfortunate because freedom of press is a pillar of democracy. So anytime people are attacking the press or shooting the messenger, it's a direct attack on democracy. And it's not just the cartel. It's also politicians. It's people in positions of authority that are sending me these messages, which I think is fucking ridiculous, because let's talk about it face to face if that's what you want to do. Sorry.
No, you're good. I love it. I love your dedication to this. If you want, please tell the audience where they can find you, where they can follow your Substack, your social media, whatever you need. Go for it.
Yeah, so I post a lot of my exclusive stories and insider information on my Substack, and it's just Katarina Szulc, Katarina, last name super fucking complicated, SZULC. Z, yeah, because I'm Canadian, so it's SZULC. And Substack is like the best spot. I post a lot of free stories on there that I think people need to know, but also because I'm an independent journalist, I need to eat. So you can also become a paid subscriber. It's like $5 a month. And a lot of my Instagram and my Twitter. Everything is my name. You can find me basically everywhere. And I really appreciate it. I'm always open to criticism when people are commenting or messaging me, criticizing my work or asking me questions that they feel like I didn't answer. I love it because I think we need more critical thinkers. And all of my work is always completely unbiased and raw and honest.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Vincent. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Be safe out there.
Ironclad creates premium content no matter the environment. From extreme elements to unforgiving terrain, we thrive on crafting content that captures the essence of your brand in the most challenging conditions. Bring your brand story to life, ensuring your message leaves an impact. Ready to elevate your vision? Connect with us today at ironcladagency.com.